Awesome. Hey,
Awesome.
everybody.
Yeah, this will be recorded, and then we'll post it in the group. So anyway, I wanted to first just thanks Jason for giving me the opportunity to put this on. I think that it's definitely something that being able to lead people is definitely something that's helped me in my ability to, be where I'm at, and I continue to learn every day. And so thanks Jason for allowing me to do this.
You're welcome. And I don't know if everybody else knows, everybody else gets to do it too. So we are going to share expertise. So let's think about something you're good at. Let's build this community up with some awesome content. So thank you, Lucas. I know that you're doing some awesome stuff. And I'm really excited to hear, because I haven't built a team to 300 people before. So I'm really curious to see what you say today. Excited.
Well, thank you. So I put together a little slide. It's brief. I'm going to try to mostly just kind of talk through a lot of the bullet points. But I wanted to use this as a guide, and then have it for a reference if anyone wants to go back, and hopefully it'll help recall information maybe we talked about. But there's not a ton of content in the slide deck itself. So yeah, first I just wanted to introduce myself. So this is I'm the second guy in from the left there, in the square cow t-shirt, when I was about 14 years old. That's when I first got my first little introduction to leadership. I have a cool story about something I learned when I was probably 14 or 15 that really helped shape my character and who I am today. So a little background about this. This is my family, and then there's one employee off to the right. I think there's more employees off to the right side of the photo there, but when I was 14, my family bought a small old 100-year-old restaurant, and we basically gutted it from the inside and rebuilt it. Started our own restaurant, and it was like an ice cream parlor, and we did short order grill and pizzas as well. And so that's kind of where I got my introduction, both into the restaurant industry and into leading people at the young age of starting at 14. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 2 girls, ages 3, and my youngest daughter just had her birthday last weekend. She's 1. I'm a multi-unit Five Guys franchisee. I have 13 units now. I'm actively seeking more acquisitions. We have anywhere between 250 and 300 employees at any time. That includes, all of the staff that you'd see in the restaurant on a regular basis, including the general managers. And then I have 3 above store level, executive level positions that oversee, 5 and 8 units respectively. And then I have a corporate trainer. And then we have a full-time controller and a bookkeeper, and then several independent contractors that provide us with other expertise. I'm an experienced business and restaurant operator. Been doing it for about 10 years. I'm constantly trying to learn and seek ways to live a more abundant life. And some of my hobbies, most of them include the outdoors. I also like sports. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. I wanted to share that briefly so you guys could get a little insight into who I am. And then kind of an outline for the discussion, we're going to focus on 3 basic areas. The first one I call selfish to servant. And, this is how kind of a buzzword today is servant leadership. And so I want to talk about how, you kind of have to be selfish in order to be able to serve other people and lead other people. And it starts with being selfish and taking care of yourself. The second piece is culture is key. This is kind of like my expertise. I've successfully turned around lots of culture in various restaurant organizations. Culture is a huge problem in our industry, and it's actually one of the reasons why I decided I wanted to go into business in the restaurant space. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time on culture. And then the last one is letting the tribe choose. And this is how I choose and develop new leaders, and really basically how I actually don't choose them. They choose themselves. So with that, we'll jump right into it, and we'll talk about selfish to servant. So there's nothing wrong with servant leadership, as I have in the bullet point there. It is a buzzword. I definitely think it's a great way to lead people. I don't think it's where you start. So what I mean by that is that we're unable to serve people if we're not in the right place ourselves and if we're not taking care of ourselves. People essentially gravitate towards people that inspire them. And so if we're not in a place where we can provide that to people or we can be that person for them, then we're unable to lead them. And so once we focus on ourselves, we've gotten ourselves in the right place. I'm going to let Jason talk about some mindset stuff here in a second. But then we can actually lead people and then we can serve people. But it starts with ourselves. If we're not happy ourselves, it's going to be hard for other people to want to follow us. And leadership is about getting people to want to follow you, not making people follow you. So one brief story that I have very recently that happened to me was, Jason knows this, we've been talking about it in my coaching, but I've been exercising every day, outside for about an hour. I'm doing, 3.5 to 4 miles of a run walk. And that kind of started because, I wasn't taking very good care of myself physically, and I didn't feel like I was performing at my highest level. And as soon as I started doing that, I had some people actually in my organization ask me, I basically made myself unavailable for, the first hour of the day. And I had some people ask me, all right, I talked to actually one of my managers as I was out walking one time, and I was telling him I was out walking, and he's like, oh, really? I was like, yeah, I wanted to get out of the house and get on my walk before I took any phone calls, because if I don't, then I won't, and I'll be stuck in the house, and I won't be able to, and then I won't get my walk in. And the moral behind this is basically like, I'm no good to anybody if I'm not taking care of myself. And so that's kind of the premise behind selfish to servant. And then, like I mentioned already, people naturally gravitate towards people who inspire them. So a question that I ask myself regularly, and I'd encourage everyone to ask themselves, is who are the people I follow? Who are the people I look up to? And why do I follow them? Why do I look up to them? What are the things that they're doing that are making me want to gravitate towards them, and then try to emulate them? And that's kind of where we get into the mindset. So Jason, I think this is a good spot for you to kind of talk about getting, what I thought you might take a second on is getting yourself in the right frame of mind to be able to lead. Nothing else we're going to talk about today, strategy, anything of that nature matters if you're not in the right mindset yourself to be able to lead people. So Jason, you want to say a few things on that?
You caught me unprepared here. So a few things on,
I knew I would put you on the spot.
That's okay. Ask me again.
So a couple things about being in the right mindset to be able to lead people, getting yourself in the right frame of mind to have people want to follow you, be an example to people, get their buy-in into the things that you want them to do. So some of those types of things, getting yourself in the right place.
Yeah. And leadership's an interesting thing, right? So it's what I like to talk to people, when I talk to clients about leadership, you have, bad leadership, you have awesome, or you have bad leadership, you have amazing leadership, and you have something in the middle. And if I look through my career, I've probably been exposed to, this many amazing leaders in my life that I've worked for, been around. And I've also been around like an admiral in the Navy who was on my coaching team, and got some experience interacting with him, and it's very interesting. And but the simplest way I like to, I would suggest that would you lead you first? Like Lucas mentioned it first. Like are you leading yourself first? Because the thing that is going to make us respond well to other people, or make other people respond to us, is congruence. Congruence is one of the most powerful states to be in that helps influence other people subconsciously, because we can all see through fluff very easily. We can feel it. We're hypersensitive to being sold. So it doesn't mean being perfect. It just means being congruent, doing what you say, leading yourself first. Because if you're expecting other people to do what you don't do yourself, you're going to get kind of like this disconnect there. So number one, like, do what you say, be that person, right? And the way I'll typically describe leadership to people that are leading or looking to lead a team at a different level is I kind of make the example of, what's the difference between a manager and a leader? And in my career, I haven't been in many leadership roles where I've led a lot of teams. A lot of times I was an individual contributor. So Lucas actually has a lot more experience in team development and things like that. I do. But from a perspective of mindset, I like to think of as a manager is like the person at McDonald's, manager at McDonald's, right? And managers spend their time making sure that their employees do their job. Right? Are you doing your job? And because if you ran a McDonald's, you would probably have a check. If you were the manager at McDonald's, you'd probably have a checklist to see if the job's getting done. Right? And that's kind of where you get into this management, and you also get into micromanagement, which all of us hate. We've all been micromanaged at some point before. So I really like to look at it from this perspective of management is basically managing to make sure the job done. Leadership is setting a clear standard of expectation of what the job is and getting an agreement that it gets done. So you could say, all right, employees, these are your responsibilities, and I need you to check this every day, and we're going to sit down and make sure you do this. You could also say, all right, Mr. New Employee, would you like to be managed or would you like to be led? And I would probably say, would you like to be micromanaged or would you like to be led? And they're going to say, I'd like to be led. Okay, so here's how we do that. This is the standards of the job performance and requirements. This is black and white. These are the job responsibilities. These are my expectations of performance. Do you understand this? Can you perform this? Do you need additional training? Okay, you understand this? You understand what to do? Okay, so my expectation is you're going to do this. And we're going to check in on touch points on weekly, monthly basis to make sure it's done so that I can spend my time taking us to more amazing places as opposed to making sure you do your job. And the challenge with that level of leadership is that it's black or white, right? It's black or white. You do the job or you don't, right? And if you don't do the job, you got to address it, right? But if you hold that standard, that expectation of performance, now you can get the team to the higher level because it requires people to step up in the process. So I'm not sure how relevant this is, but this is kind of my leadership spiel. But
it's super relevant.
That's kind of how I think about it, because a lot of times we're in this middle ground with leaders. So set the standard. And the way that I like to think about people on my team being a fit is kind of the Tony Robbins model on if the employees are right. It's really simple, 3 steps. Can do, will do, team fit. Can they do the job? Will they do the job? And are they a team fit? So if they can do the job and they will do the job and they're team fit, they're great. But if you have someone who can do the job and will do the job, isn't a team fit, it's not going to work. And then we have people who can do the job, don't do the job, and are team fit. And then you have people who can't do the job, will do it, and So can do, will do, team fit is a great way I like to look at staff and to figure out how they need to be managed or led to get there. But the number one thing I see business leaders not doing is setting clearly defined standards and expectations of performance right off the bat. Do you want to be micromanaged or led? Okay, here are the requirements for led. Here's the job. Do you understand it? Do you need any training? Okay, that's going to happen. Okay. If this doesn't happen, here's what happens if it's not done. Warning, training, blah, 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 termination. Clearly defined, black or white. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective on management.
Jason. So you actually gave us a great foray into our next slide where we kind of talk about more of the strategic aspects of developing a team, kind of my expertise. And so thank you for that context. I have one story that I want to share about leadership, and it's about my first job in my parents' restaurant before we go on to the next slide. And as I put a poll up in the Facebook group, and most people wanted to hear about my story, so I'm going to try to include as much of that as I can. And also, Jason, thanks for the conversation. I'm much better at dialogue, and hearing you talk gives me more ideas and more value to contribute. So thank you for that. So the story that I want to share,
people too. If you have questions. Who's House Mex? Is that Matt?
Yeah, that's me. How's it going?
It's good. It's funny. I don't know people's faces. I hear your voices. Okay. So that's Matt and Ofrio. House Mex. Okay. Everyone else is using their name here. Okay. Got it. Go ahead, Lucas. Sorry for jumping in.
So yeah, no. So the story that I wanted to share was about my family's restaurant. It was about an Employee of the Month competition. I'm 14 years old, right? And so my dad creates this Employee of the Month competition. And the employee, I'll actually go back to the slide. So this employee, the one on the far right, to the far right of me, or I'm the second one in from the right side. He's the guy that's kind of in half on the picture. So his name was Derek. And like 2 months in a row, Derek won this Employee of the Month contest. And I was busting my butt. I mean, I was doing everything I could to win. I don't even remember what the prize was. For me, it wasn't really about what I won. It was more just about that I wanted to win. And so I got into it with my dad one day, and I basically was like, Dad, I never win Employee of the Month because I'm your kid, and you don't want to seem biased. And I can remember to this day, it shaped my entire future. My dad said, no, son, the way you're talking to me is exactly the reason why you haven't won Employee of the Month. You're more worried about other people knowing how great you are than just being great. So the lesson that I got in that was that I spent so much of my time making sure everybody knew what I was doing to win Employee of the Month, even though I was doing a good job, that I wasn't being a real leader. Leaders don't have to talk to have people follow them. Leaders, by their actions and the way that they carry themselves, get people to naturally gravitate towards them. So I just kind of want to share that story. I thought it was definitely relevant to this. It definitely shaped my future and how I look at leadership. So when I'm leading people now, I listen a lot more. I talk a lot less. I try to understand their perspective a lot more, and then I give my insight after I understand where they're coming from. And so that lesson's definitely shaped me, and it kind of is important as we get into this next little section here. It talks about culture. So this is kind of like my bread and butter. So just to tell you about my experience and why I would say I've developed a system for doing this very well is we bought our first 5 restaurants 3 years ago. And a little bit about the restaurant industry and why, I mean, a lot of you probably know there's kind of a negative context surrounding the restaurant industry and employees that work there, how they feel, how people treat their employees in the restaurant industry. It's kind of looked at as like, you know, a low level, oh, you work in the restaurant industry. I mean, when I used to manage 10 restaurants for somebody else making 6 figures in Nevada, when I told people that I worked for Five Guys, it was like all of a sudden it was like, oh, you're one of the restaurant people, you know, like there's nowhere to go in the restaurant except for in the restaurant industry, except for cooking the food, right? That's kind of people's perception of it. And then from an employee perspective, it's that when I work in restaurants, people treat me like crap. I work for low pay. I have to do it because I have bills to pay. It's not something I want to do, not something I want to do forever. And I worked in this industry as an employee. And so I saw firsthand that, honestly, there's a reason for that stigma. Most restaurant operators are incredibly bad at creating a positive culture, a positive working environment, giving their employees things to look forward to, giving them ways to learn. The culture is just awful. And so one of my reasons why I wanted to go in the restaurant is I knew there was a better way to do it. I knew there was a better way to run restaurants where you didn't have high turnover, where people wanted to stay and work. And obviously you're going to have a lot of kids that work there. There's going to be constant flow of people, but I wanted to create an environment where we could support families and provide careers for people that they wanted to be a part of, as opposed to just a stepping stone into whatever their next gig was and something that they couldn't wait to get out of. And so when we bought the first 5 restaurants in Arizona about just over 3 years ago, I made that my primary focus, was creating a culture where the management level employees especially felt like they were respected, they had growth opportunities, there were places for them to go, they could make a career out of this where they could support their family. And that's what I started focusing on. And so I kind of developed a system that I'll share at the end for developing that culture quickly. We just bought 8 restaurants in California. We're going through the same process. we got slowed down a little bit by COVID, but we just recently, restarted our process about, I don't know, a month and a half or so ago, and we're progressing incredibly quickly. And so in my experience, it works. So a couple key points about culture. The first one is your culture will be what you want and allow it to be. This is the most true statement. If there's one thing you took out of this, take this. Your culture will be what you want and allow it to be, without question. An example, we have in California these restaurants that we're in the process of turning around. One of our stores constantly had higher complaints than others from customers about customers or employees being aggressive towards customers, not even really aggressive, just like dismissive and almost like posturing against the customers. And it continuously happened. And compared to all the other restaurants I've ever run, I've never seen this before. And we talked to the general manager, kind of tried to figure out what was going on, got a lot of excuses. And I told my area manager, I was leading this from afar. I'm trying to empower him as much as possible. I said, there's a GM problem. I mean, almost 100% of the time, when I go in to fix a restaurant, the team does not need to change. The leader in the restaurant needs to change. The number one, the general manager. So long story short, that general manager, we end up, a couple things happen and we end up saying, yeah, you know what? You're not the right fit for our team. It's time for you to go. We didn't have a general manager lined up to take over the spot. We put our area trainer in there, our corporate trainer, until we found the right person. And within 2 weeks, complaints completely stopped. 100% stopped. Haven't had one, knock on wood, in, I don't know, maybe 3-4 weeks now. And we were getting them almost on a daily basis before. And it instantly stopped. So when I talk to the employees now, they're happy, they're positive. Same employees. We haven't changed any employees, with the exception of the normal expected turnover rate for hourly employees in the restaurant space. So lesson here is the leadership sets the tone for the culture. Your culture will be what you want it and allow it to be. So if you're inside an organization, I've done this. I worked for somebody else running restaurants. Also, one of those restaurant operators I talk of when I say, they don't treat their employees well. They yell and scream and they want to play dictator, and it's just not a pleasant place to work. I worked for him as a general manager, and I had experience with an above store level leader that treated me that way, and it was awful. And so when I became an above store level leader, I told myself I was never going to allow that to affect my general managers. Whether the ownership chose to establish that type of culture or not, I was going to create a shield. And that doesn't mean that information doesn't flow. If the ownership wants something done, it doesn't mean that can't get done. What that means is I'm going to take the brunt of everything that happens, and I'm going to filter it out, and I'm going to take it to my team members below me that look up to me in a way that's palatable, in a way that they can understand. So inside of an organization, there's two different opportunities to create culture. One is you have your own organization, you create culture from the top down. The second is you're inside of an organization. You might have a culture above you or a general culture of the company that may be good or not good. But the idea is you can create your own bubble. Those people that you're leading can live inside of your culture without having to miss out on information. So your culture will be what you want and allow it to be. And then the second most important part, and it might actually be, it's right up there with number one. The second most important part is your team's values, and Jason kind of touched on this a minute ago. Your team's values aligning with your values is the most important. There's not a correct culture, right? It will be what you want and allow it to be. And there is not a correct culture. There are some that are better than others. Some leaders create better cultures than other leaders. People generally gravitate towards one type of culture over another. But there's multiple types of great cultures, right? There's the type of culture that everybody is friends and they do stuff on the weekends and the company throws get-togethers for them and they socialize and whatever. There's other great cultures where it's all about work, but everybody enjoys their job, enjoys what they're doing, and they get the job done. And then there's bad cultures that are toxic and filled with drama. And so your team's values, aligning with your values is the most important. There's no correct culture. This also leads into another part of developing this culture is don't be the one to push the culture. Let others establish the culture. If you create a team full of people that share your values, they'll naturally create a culture you can be proud of. You can guide that culture and it will be what you want and allow it to be. But you don't have to force it down through the organization. Get other people on your team who are natural leaders, allow them to establish the culture. Make sure they align with your values. Jason talked about that, right? Are they a good fit for the team? You know, Jason's Tony Robbins, the three things, I have to go back and remember exactly what they were. Can do, will do, and are they a good team fit? I would say all three of those I agree with. I would say, are they a good team fit? When I'm looking for somebody to hire is number one. Do they fit well on my team? Then can they do the job? Will they do the job before I hire them? So get people on your team that align with your values. And there is no correct culture. Allow people to create culture so long as you've created a team full of people that share your values. Anybody have any questions on this slide before we move to the next one? This is really important, right? This is kind of like the foray into creating an organization that runs itself of hundreds of employees without you having to feel like, I mean, when people think about what my day looks like, they think, man, you're going crazy. 300 employees. How do you do that? And the reality is I have time to do things like this. I work a lot. I have time to do things like this. I have time to do my coaching sessions with Jason. I'm not forcing that time into my schedule. I've created a culture where there are other leaders that are able to handle all of the day-to-day stuff so that I can really focus on vision and growth of the company. Now, anybody have any questions or anything they want to add before we move on?
I think that's great, actually. I think that's great, like, because now I haven't built, the companies I've started was always just a small number of people. So I haven't built a large teams of people. And the first thing that comes to mind when you think about creating culture is like, the leader needs to create it. I think that's what everybody would probably think. But your comment about letting them create it is brilliant because they take ownership of it. It feels like it's theirs. And hiring. So it sounds like the first step to creating great culture is the hiring process, hiring the right people. And when you hire the right people with the right values, then you can let them create it and then they take ownership of it versus being forced into it. Because I've been forced into culture before, right? We all have. But that's a juicy nugget there. I love that.
Yeah, and I think, I wrote down a couple notes for myself, and one of the things I wrote is, in my experience, when you try to force culture, you're met with resistance. People are naturally resistant to things that don't feel natural to them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you have to allow a culture that you don't like. What it means is you have to have the right people to establish the culture. People, we're tribal instinctually. And so people will naturally gravitate towards the natural leaders in the room. And if those people are aligned in your values, then they will establish a culture you can be proud of. So yeah, I think I really wanted to emphasize that. And I'm glad you did as well, Jason, reiterate that. Because I think that in my success, that's been the number one thing that I've been able to do. And sometimes, my experience has mostly been taking over organizations and growing on a base that's already there. And so in my experience, sometimes you have people that will work already in place that you can help them, educate them, coach them, give them perspective, and that will allow you to shift the culture. Other times you need to get new people, it's a combination of the two, right? So, I asked Jason about getting DISC profiles. DISC profile is a big part of that for me. What kind of people align, especially my above store level management, do I want to work with? And so there's different pieces of information. We'll get into strategically how you can figure out who those people are here in a second. But yeah, glad you reemphasized that, Jason. I can't emphasize it enough. That's definitely been the catalyst. And so then kind of the last big slide here is this comes back to this topic of allowing your leaders to establish the culture, allowing your team to establish the culture. I call this let the tribe choose. This is how I select leaders, and honestly, how I don't select them. I allow natural leaders to emerge, and I focus my energy on recognizing who those people are. Who are the people that others naturally gravitate towards? And why do they do that? If they align with my values, people naturally gravitate towards them. They cannot fail. They can't fail. They align with my values and people naturally gravitate towards them. They can't fail. That's what I mean when I say let the tribe choose. I don't mean literally like I'm going to take a survey. If I have 20 employees in a restaurant, I'm trying to choose a new manager. I'm not going to send them all a survey and say, who do you think should be the next general manager? Right? It's very organic. I'm going to observe. I'm going to watch. I'm going to see who those people are naturally gravitating towards. Those are the people I'm going to look for. So the tribe, right, their employees are actually selecting those leaders, even though they don't really know they are. But then when I put that person in place, again, there's no resistance. That's the person they were naturally cycling towards anyway. And then, as I said here already, your job is to recognize those leaders and give them space to lead. Coach, mentor, train, give them vision, push vision for the company, allow them to lead. Don't get in their way. And then encourage those leaders to start recognizing other leaders, right? So I have an area manager in California. His name is Shane. We've only been working together for like 6 months, 7 months. And we're turning around 8 restaurants. There's in this particular, 200 of our 300 employees are in these 8 restaurants. And so he's got a big task. I knew right away we were aligned in values. I knew he was a great fit to work in our company. And so now what we're really working on is he's a great leader. He's a natural leader. People naturally gravitate towards him. What I'm trying to help him now learn is to recognize the leaders, the natural leaders in the restaurant, and put them in a position to lead. Right? That's what I do on a high level. Now with 13 restaurants in 2 different states and 300 employees, I can't do that on a individual store level basis anymore. And so now my responsibility is encourage him and teach him to recognize natural leaders and then give them the tools and skills they need to do the job well. It's not about, do they have 15 years of culinary experience? If they do, and they're a great fit for our team, great. If they're a natural leader, they're a great fit for our team, I can teach them how to cook and how to run a restaurant. So that's what we're looking for. Natural leaders, good personality fits. That's what I mean when I say let the tribe choose. Allow those employees to show you who they want to follow, right? We naturally follow people. Our tendency is to follow people. I technically don't have a boss that I follow. I follow other thought leaders, right? I seek out their content. I try to better myself by following what they say, what their guidance is. So those are the type of people on a smaller scale in our organization that we're looking for to lead. And we're looking for who are the people naturally gravitating towards, who are they telling me they want to follow? And then those are the people I'm going to put in place. So any questions here, any commentary before we move on? I think this is also something that's definitely made my life a lot easier, especially lately. The 8 restaurants was a new battle for me, and this is definitely something that's really helped.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to follow the natural leaders there, because how many times have you had a job and the person they promoted to management was the guy that you didn't like, right? And you're just
100%.
like, So it's funny because it's almost like the perspective you're operating from is like, which is the way I can do this? If we started to pick apart your mindset a little bit, I would guess that you would be thinking, what's the way I can do this with the most flow, with the least amount of disruption? Like what is there and how do I shape what's there? as opposed to I'm going to create this on top of it. And I think that's a big important distinction a lot of leaders forget, is they just start to think what they want to create besides looking at what's there.
Yep, I 100% agree. I think for me, I mean, I'm high D, high I. Jason, you know that. But I'm definitely higher I than I am D, and I don't necessarily seek out conflict or resistance. I don't mind conflict or resistance. So my whole premise behind leadership is I'm going to try to make it as frictionless as possible, right? So I could go out and we're very competitive in our compensation. We make sure we take great care of managers. I could go out and I could hire new general managers that are overqualified and could, manage the restaurants to a maximum level. But I would also be bringing in potentially, not saying all restaurant managers are this way, you can definitely find a unique combination of skill set and mindset, personality, organizational fit. But if I neglect that part and I just bring in these people with all this experience, a lot of times we're going to have a lot of resistance and a lot of friction. One of the things in the restaurant industry it's just been like one of my biggest pet peeves for the longest time is people that are promoted in the restaurant industry, and most restaurant organizations, are people that, one, will always do what you ask them to do, regardless of if they agree or not, and two, will work incredibly hard all the time, but three, they have to be the fastest person in the restaurant. Like their speed of service has to be incredibly fast. And it's driven me crazy because a lot of times those people who are great, great, great doers, they're awesome people to have on your team and they should be recognized and rewarded for that. They're not leaders. You put them in a position of leadership and they're so focused on doing everything themselves that they can't lead other people. And so you really have to try to find that unique skill set, and you have to look for the people that are natural leaders. A lot of times it's the person who I look at in the restaurant and their skill set compared to other people, they can do the job. They're not my fastest person dressing the hamburgers, right? They're not my fastest person closing the restaurant. They can do it. They can do everything great. They're willing to do anything. They're willing to do the hard work, but they're not that person who is the fastest or the most efficient or the most skilled. A lot of times they're the person that, they do the job really well, but they also think a lot in advance. They also help other people. They look out for the whole team as opposed to just themselves and their job. They're trying to pick people up and people are naturally gravitating towards them. So we don't have to spend any more time on this, but I definitely agree. Yeah. Look for the natural leaders and then give them the tools they need to lead. If they don't have the skill set can be taught. A lot of times leadership can be taught to a certain extent, but I think Jason posted something today actually, right, Jason? Something about like mindset comes before strategy or something like that. It's this.
Yeah, mindset is the precursor. Mindset is the precursor to strategy. Strategy comes from mindset.
Exactly. The same thing with leaders, right? So who they are, what they stand for, their values, how they think, that's a precursor in my mind to skill set. Skill set is second. Can they do the job is second. And so lastly, I just wanted to kind of go through a 4-step process I have really quickly. I won't go into a lot of it in detail, but for changing culture quickly. Number 1, identify the current culture, leaders, their values, and who and what is driving that culture. Some quick ways to do this: questions in groups of people. Don't ask questions to your leader specifically, individually. Like, let's say I have a guy who, he's the general manager of a store, and he might have 2 or 3 shift leaders or an assistant manager on his team, and then a bunch of crew level employees. And I have some questions. It's a new restaurant to me. I don't know how they're operating necessarily. I'm trying to figure some stuff out. Instead of just going right to that general manager and saying, hey, what about this? I'm going to ask in a group of 3 or 4 of the leaders. And I'm going to see who everyone naturally looks to for the answer. A lot of times it might surprise you, it's not the general manager. A lot of times it could be a shift leader or a crew employee that people look to answer the question. That's one way. Ask subordinates, so ask crew level employees who they go to for certain things, right? So if you have this problem, who are you going to go to? If you have something going on at home and you need some help at work with your schedule, who are you going to talk to about it? Again, surprisingly, a lot of times it's not the general manager, that person that you would think it would be. And then the third thing, and I do this, but I do it sparingly, is social settings and activities. The reason is I don't want to establish a culture where people only like to work for us because we spend lots of money doing social activities. There's nothing wrong with that, and we do it a couple times a year. We try to, make sure our teams enjoy getting together and have a good time, and we all get to know each other. But in the sense of social settings and activities for identifying who the leaders are and what the current culture is, it's a great tool to use right at the beginning. In social settings, again, you're going to see a different dynamic than in the workplace, right? Most leaders are natural leaders in their social settings as well. When I was a kid and I was in high school, we used to like to go to concerts. I was 16, and my parents would actually get phone calls from other kids' parents asking if I was driving so that they could go to the concert. I was a natural leader in social settings. My friends it wasn't like I was calling people saying, hey, what are we doing? My friends were calling me like, hey, what's going on this weekend? Right? So when you get in social settings, your leaders will appear naturally as well. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I saw I got distracted by chat. Bye, yeah. Nicole.
Bye, Nicole.
Thanks so much, guys. Sorry I have to run.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Right,
you can see the rest of it on the recording too. So
awesome. Thanks.
So we're gonna see those people in social settings. That's kind of a cool tool to use. Who are the people when you get all together that people are naturally kind of like? Who are they surrounding? Right? You go to Dave and Buster's. Who are the ones that who dictates what games people are going to next? Kind of an interesting way to think about it. Second, get to know the leaders identified in step 1. Are they adaptable? Are they open to change? What's their DISC profile? Replace leaders if you need to. One thing I did in my first restaurants that was a huge mistake. I took way too long to replace leaders. It took me a year and a half to turn around the first 5 restaurants because I was too slow to replace leaders that weren't going to be a good organizational fit. And it probably cost me a lot of growth because I was so focused on turning around restaurants. Bad leaders will kill your organization. Bad leaders will kill your organization. So replace leaders if you need to. If they're not a good fit, if they're not open to change, if they don't gel well with your organization, change them as fast as you can. Even if that means you don't have a leader where you need them. Somebody will step up. When there's a void, somebody will step up and fill that void, and that's the person that you really want there. So if you don't have a spot to fill, oh well, get rid of them. I stayed, we have a restaurant 2 hours from my house. I lived in a Residence Inn for a month and a half because I couldn't have that leader there anymore. And I knew that I wanted to put the right person there, and somebody stepped up, filled the void. I was able to get out of there. Now they're a great team member, great manager for us. Replace bad leaders. Bad leaders will kill your organization. Then third, once you've established who your leaders are, give them the tools, systems, processes necessary to establish the culture you want. Notice I didn't say establish the culture. Give them the tools, systems, processes necessary to establish the culture. In my case, I try to create a culture of idea creation, accountability, and value creation, not a culture of I'm going to tell you what to do all the time. I hate that. That's me. Other people's culture could work a different way. No wrong cultures. Idea creation, accountability, value creation. People share ideas openly. People aren't scared of getting in trouble when problems happen because they know we're going to look at it as a learning opportunity as opposed to something that you get in trouble for. There's no punishment, right? There's punishment for not following the standards of conduct, right? There are punishments for that. Mistakes in the restaurant business, mistakes handling cash, mistakes doing these other things. We can teach and we can educate. So we don't create a culture of fear. We create a culture of idea creation, accountability, value creation, shared ideas, learning, progress, forward thinking, those types of ideas. And then the fourth, this is kind of a goofy one, but it's so true. Encourage, support, serve, get out of the way. Strategize, reinforce values, help, get out of the way. Once you've established your culture, you have your leaders in place, get out of the way. Let them lead. You're there to help them, encourage them, support them, continuously share vision, show them where the company's going, how you want them to help direct the company, and then let them lead. That's why they're there. The hardest thing for leaders is to let somebody else lead. For me, the hardest thing for me is to step back and let Shane do his job. Because I naturally want to be that person. I'm a high I. I want to be in front of those 200 employees, right? I want to be the one dictating the culture. I want to be the one leading. But I can do that by instilling vision, reinforcing values, strategizing, helping Shane, and letting Shane do his job. And then I can get in the position where I can now impact, instead of 300 employees, I can impact 3,000 employees or 5,000 employees or 10,000 employees, because I've gotten out of the way, created great leaders, I've allowed them to do their job. So that's kind of my 4 quick steps into, shifting culture, changing culture, and getting organizations running in the right direction. So that's the end of it. I want to do a quick Q&A. So we can cover that last slide if you want to, and then I don't know what time it is. We might have 5 minutes here or so for some quick questions. Then we can wrap it up. So what do you think, Jason?
So this is awesome, actually. I know most of the people on this call right now don't run businesses with teams, but this is awesome. This is really good. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for putting the time together. I appreciate this. And for those that are on this call live right now, one of the things you said first was leading yourself first, right? You said leading yourself first. So give me, how would you describe how you lead yourself first, or what standards you hold yourself to that allows you to lead? What standards do you hold yourself to? I know it's a high C question, but what standards do you hold yourself to? What decisions have you made about leading yourself that have allowed you to lead at this level?
So great question. I've never really thought about it from that perspective before, I don't think. I think it's kind of something that comes natural to me. If I was dissecting it, I would probably say that number one, I focus on educating myself, taking care of my mind, making sure that whatever information I'm trying to share with other people, I have 100% confidence that it's the right information to be sharing. And then secondly, never be afraid to do anything that you'll ask somebody else to do. So quick example of this, before I actually owned restaurants, now this employee that I'm about to talk about, this manager, when I worked for somebody else, actually works for me and runs 5 of our restaurants. But back then I was his area supervisor. He was a general manager. We had dirty floors in a restaurant constantly in his restaurant. And every time I go in there, I'd get the same song and dance. Oh, they just scrubbed them last night. We need somebody to come in here and power wash them. And I had run restaurants. I'm like, no, dude, I'm telling you, you just got to scrub the floors. And so that day I actually got out that morning. I got out buckets of water. I put them on the floor, soapy water. I scrubbed the floor. I showed him how clean the floor could be. So second thing is never be afraid to do the dirty work, right? If you're asking somebody else to do it, it has to be something that either you've done yourself, they know you will do it, or you're willing to do it if you haven't done it before, willing to try new things. And then the third thing I think is be open to ideas from other people. Don't be, don't think you have to know everything. Make sure you're collaborating. And so that's something I also hold myself to, is making sure that I'm not trying to dictate exactly what's happening. I'm trying to share a solution a desired outcome. And then I'm looking for other people to fill in the how. How do we get that desired outcome? It doesn't have to be my idea. And so those are kind of the things I think and that's also allowed me to be a better leader. right? I've learned a lot of things from other people by them telling me the how and me saying, hey, that's a great idea. This is the desired outcome. How do we get there? And then I learn from that as well. Those are kind of the three things I think. Mostly I would say, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Don't ask people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself or haven't done yourself. And then lastly is, make sure that you're giving a desired outcome and you're listening to the hows. And then you can guide the discussion. Hey, that's a great idea. What if we combine that with this? And this was the solution we came up with.
Let me ask you another question here. I got another question. It's real quick. Because one of the things that you're naturally good at that you don't even think about is going after what's possible. Like you don't have any fear of going after what's possible, right? And the interesting thing is that we all have strengths that we don't think are strengths. So what is your perspective on, this may sound like a foreign language to you, but what's your perspective on going after the absolute biggest target you can versus playing it safe?
I mean, I would say without question, I'd probably just go after the biggest target I can. I mean, I don't know.
I know you do, but why?
Because I think that I genuinely want to impact a lot of people. And so I think that I feel like I'm being selfish, and I don't know, this could sound narcissistic or egotistical. I have no idea, but this is how I think. So I think that I'm being selfish if I am not making myself available to help as many people as I possibly can, and to create a culture people want to be involved in and a team people want to be involved in for as many people as I can. If I'm not providing that opportunity for a lot of people, I think I'm being selfish. And so that's kind of why I naturally gravitate towards whatever the biggest idea is I have at the time I'm going to go after, because that's what I can impact the most people. For example, if I see restaurant deals all the time for 1 or 2 restaurants, and I'm like, I ignore them. Like, I'm to the point, if it's not 8 to 10 units, I'm not even going to consider it, because I want to impact as many people as possible. So,
okay. And what do you believe about failure?
I believe that I learn from it. I believe that failure is different for different people. I believe failure is about perspective. And trying and not achieving a massive target, to me, is not failure. Trying something and failing, trying something, and like, let's say, I had these 13 restaurants. We have loans and all these obligations, and coronavirus hits and we lose the business, right? Hypothetically. I don't view that as failure. I don't. I just view it as, hey, I learned a lot of great stuff. I know I was able to do a lot of great things. I can replicate this. I can do it again. I can improve upon the weaknesses that I had and move on. So I think that failure is perspective. I think failure is all about perspective. I don't think that failure is cut and dry, and I don't think it's a word that can easily be defined in a one-size-fits-all approach.
Awesome. Thank you.
So,
was that helpful?
No.
Is anybody else? Any other questions? No?
I think we got anyone on mute. I have a couple more minutes. If anyone does have a question, we might give one more minute. If not, then we'll save the recording, and you guys can reach out to me individually on the Facebook group. More than happy. I've chatted with several of you already. More than happy to talk with anybody. I know, Matt, we still have to get together. We've been playing a little bit of tag.
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions. But I can ask you, but they're not as much about this. I want to hear about, businesses as far as, obviously, how could you replicate this in real estate? And then when you look at the saleability of it, I mean, when you're buying and selling these, what kind of a multiple are you using? I mean, when you're assessing a deal of buying 8 restaurants, I mean, I'm just really interested in the financing. Are you taking an SBA loan and it's just like 10% down? Where did you come up with your seed capital? I don't know. It's just, I'm interested in the scalability of it. So it'd be fun to talk on the phone. I don't want to get.
Yeah, man. We'll get on the phone for sure.
Well, if you guys are open to recording that, I'm sure that would be useful to other people as well. But I'll be respectful of time. But I got to jump. I got a call. All right, guys.
Yep.
Thanks for hosting this. Thank you very much, Lucas. Thanks, Lucas.
All right. Take care. Bye.